is a time to be bold.
It comes from China.
Coronavirus pandemic alert, UK and Italy hit.
A time of disruption in the life of our country.
We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together.
Through the radio, we can all talk to each other and maybe help each other out.
I want to thank Isle of Wight radio listeners for how much they've engaged with this.
It is time to join the nation to clap for our carers.
It's a bit mad, man. Like, you have up days, down days, all of the in between. Of course, you know that you can rely on us.
National treasure, Colonel Tom Moore. Good morning, Colonel Tom.
Good morning, Dave.
It's Harry Styles, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello. Harry, where in the world are you, mate?
I'm actually in California.
You're self-isolating over there.
I got stuck.
The world's biggest radio rave, Kiss Fest.
Will you be cutting your own hair, First Minister?
I'm not letting Peter anywhere near my hair.
The dog is literally eating through her wires.
Take your right hand, take your left hand, sprinkle on some water when you do the hand dance.
Some musical inspiration during the lockdown.
You are a key worker, your girlfriend is a key worker. I'm opening number 10.
Oh, make me a millionaire!
Tommy!
No way!
Absolute Radio 40.
I'm Professor Green, bringing you help and advice during the coronavirus pandemic.
60-second support.
If you're struggling, it's important to talk about it.
So right now, let's join together across the UK and reach out to someone.
Welcome to Tuning In Finance. Thanks for joining us for a packed hour where we'll be hearing from a wide range of speakers with sessions from marketing consultant and former CMO of HSBC, Chris Clark, Hits breakfast presenter Fleur East, in conversation with Paul Gerard, Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie, and Radiocentre's Mark Barber, Judith Spilsbury and Camilla Camara. But our first session is from Lucy Barrett. As Radiocentre's client director, Lucy champions the value and impact of commercial radio amongst advertisers and agencies. Her mission is to help advertisers see radio differently. Today, Lucy will provide an overview of the radio industry.
Good morning and welcome to Tuning In Finance. My name is Lucy Barrett and I'm the client director here at Radiocentre. This morning's event is going to take just over 1 hour. It's fast-paced and features a number of speakers from both the world of audio and finance. They're all expert in their fields and they're all going to take a closer look at the sector. You'll be able to ask questions as you go along via Twitter, and the instructions will be below this presentation and appearing regularly all the way through. So I'm just going to start the morning off by just giving a quick overview of radio. I'm going to have a look at some listening figures, where radio fits into the overall landscape, and then I'm going to end with a little bit of recent Radiocentre research before I hand you over to Chris Clark, who is the former Chief Marketing Officer of HSBC, and he's also a non-executive director of Aviva. So looking at the radio landscape, more so now than ever before, radio and audio is relevant. You know, whether it's podcasts or streaming or voice recognition devices, audio is such a core part of our lives. And that's true for radio too, but what distinguishes radio is the intimate relationship that listeners have with it. So this is probably why 90% of the population tune into radio each week, and 36 million of them are commercial radio listeners, and they listen on an average for 13 hours each week. So if I was to look at one particular medium which has caused probably the most disruption in the media market in the last 10 years, it would be social media. And when you stack up radio against all social media, you'll see that people still spend more time with their radio than they do with social media. Now, why is that? Well, it's a number of reasons, all of which I will try and explain through the short presentation. But actually, it's an incredibly trusted medium. So radio is the most trusted medium. We have our own research, but the one I'm showing you now is according to the annual barometer survey from the European Commission. We came out top this year, but we didn't just come out top this year. Radio has been the most trusted medium for the last decade since this survey began. So let's take a look at the total audio market. So I've taken out radio for the time being, but if you want to have a look at this chart, on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that the top two, so that's the grey and the green, are owned music, So that's digital tracks, so iTunes, that kind of thing. And the top one is CDs and vinyl and grey. Now, since 2016, the two lower ones, so that's the podcast in black and the yellow one is on-demand streaming services, have been steadily growing, particularly the on-demand music services. And that has absolutely squeezed own music. So it seems that we're much happier to stream music than to own music as our own collections. So what happens when I add back in radio? Well, you'll see that radio has actually remained incredibly steady over this same period. So since 2016, it's remained steady. Now, I would also say that it actually dominates because it has 75% of the total listening day. We're often asked about young listening, about kids now aren't really listening to radio. They prefer to have their music curated. They prefer to stream their own music. They don't want music curated by someone else, and they're not interested in news or current affairs. They just want to stream their own music instead of radio. Well, this chart shows you that this is absolutely not the case. The two bottom lines are podcasts and commercial streaming services. So this is services such as Spotify that you can advertise on and target those younger audiences. And you will see that they have around 20% and 17% of the total market. The top one, the pink one, is commercial radio, which is 66%. So it has a 66% weekly reach of 15 to 24-year-olds. So they're not going away. They're still here and they're listening in their millions. Let's go forward now to listening, or back to these to lockdown listening. At Radiocentre, we asked commercial radio listeners some questions about their listening habits during this pandemic, and 38% of them have increased their listening over this period. Now, who were they? Well, the first tranche is the biggest, and that's 45% increase in listening, and that's people who are newly working from home. So that's people like you or me, who went into the office every day and suddenly found themselves at home feeling, a little bit lonely, and the radio was a really lovely company and to put on and keep in the background and listen to some music. The serendipity of hearing a song I hadn't heard in a while, it really has been a lifeline for some people. And actually the newly at home, so this is people who were furloughed or for whatever reason who'd normally be out and about, they increased their listening by 43%. And of course, the key workers, the people that kept us going, the hospital workers, the transport workers, the supermarket workers, they also increased their listening by 32%. Some of that was as a connection to the outside world and for news. So commercial radio played a very, very vital service during this time. Our own research was backed up by Bauer & Global, who could see the surge in online listening through smart devices and through their apps. And they had a daily reach online surge of 15%. So obviously it'd be much higher for some of their stations, but it was reassuring to see that even through the streaming service, they could see an increase. So we talk about the three phases of the pandemic here at Radiocentre. We talk about the shock, we talk about the bounce back, and we talk about the recovery. But I like to think of it as a traffic light system. So shock was back on, end of March, when we were all told we had to stay at home. We couldn't go anywhere. We could only go out of our houses to exercise for once a day, or to get food or vital supplies. It feels like a very long time ago now. The bounce back has been as we've been slowly released from lockdown, and all the time, every day, we're getting new announcements about what we can and can't do. And obviously last weekend, we saw some big relaxations happen in terms of people were allowed to go and stay overnight, and they were allowed to go to their local pub or restaurant, albeit with a lot of restrictions, but it does feel like life's getting back to normal. And then the third phase, green, is recovery, which hasn't come yet. And then beyond that is still being debated what will happen next. But if you take a look at this YouGov weekly mood tracker, now I know it's a lot of lines and you're not going to be able to read it, but it highlights how people's mood is changing. So happiness is now on an equal footing with frustration, boredom and stress. So where we were in sort of March and April, where we were all feeling really anxious and stressed and fed up of being stuck at home, we're now feeling quite good. And it also shows that people are itching to get out of their houses and start behaving normally again. And it feels like relaxation of lockdown is going to unlock a lot of consumer demand. So we did some Radiocentre research called Bounce Back and Beyond, and we explored this pent-up demand by sector. And unsurprisingly, social activities and travel topped the list of things people were most looking forward to spending their money on post-lockdown. And this isn't surprising because these were the activities that had been most impacted by lockdown. But when it comes to whether they'll be spending more or less money versus pre-lockdown, then the pattern changes. And despite restaurants, bars and clubs and international travel scoring really highly on that previous table as what people were excited to spend money on, they're actually going to be a little bit more pragmatic in what they're going to spend money on. And as you see here, domestic travel is quite high. So I think we're all expecting to holiday in Devon or Cornwall or Yorkshire or any of those places this summer. The good news is that research also highlights the important role that radio can play in influencing these decisions of where people are going to spend their money. So just looking at this chart, I want you to bear in mind that many people feel that in general they're not really influenced by advertising. So these scores are really impressive. So to summarise, we're now moving into a brief bounce back phase where people are going to be enjoying the opportunity to unleash their pent-up demand and spend money on some of the things that they've been really missing. And for the rest of the morning, we're going to be talking about the role radio can play in helping them how to spend this money. So thank you for listening. I'll be back at the end to say goodbye, but handing over to Chris Clark now. Thank you.
You can get involved in today's event by posting your questions using the hashtag tuningin or tweeting at Radiocentre. On the way, we have sessions from Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie and Radiocentre's Planning Director Mark Barber. But our next session is from marketing legend Chris Clark. Chris was CMO for HSBC and spent 16 years in a number of leadership roles at the organisation. Whilst at HSBC, he was one of the architects of the world's local bank positioning and led an organisation of over 1,000 marketing professionals. Prior to HSBC, Chris was in advertising with the bulk of his career at Saatchi & Saatchi. He now consults and advises a variety of organisations.
Hi there, my name is Chris Clark. I've worked in financial services in marketing for many years and have spent time at HSBC and also now a non-executive director of Aviva. So I'm sure many of you out there who are wrestling with marketing programs in the financial services industry have got quite a lot of questions. And we do find ourselves in that cliche of a statement in unprecedented times. So there's so much change going on and people out there are looking at how that change affects their businesses and how those businesses affect people's lives, and financial services is a pretty important part of most people's lives. But when you look at the pace of change and you look at the kinds of things that are being talked about in terms of change, we're hopefully going to see lots of good things come out of this too. But we've been in a period of time where change has been pretty fast. When you look at how the digital world has changed almost everything we do, when you look at the apps we all build to run our businesses, when you look at the way in which customers interact with us through social media, we've got an incredibly different landscape. And quite a lot of us have adapted very well to it. Some haven't, but at the end of the day, for those who are surviving and for those who are thriving, all of these changes are things that may be the kinds of things you wish to embrace. But in terms of meeting those challenges, and starting the process of figuring out what happens next. Anyone who's got a crystal ball who thinks they can be clear about what's happening next, well, I'm sort of inclined to think you're probably kidding yourself. But the most important thing to start to consider is your organisation and what it stands for. What are you all about? because those are the sorts of things that are going to colour the next phase of both marketing and brands. And actually it's what you do that will colour more around how people see you versus what you say. And your ability to tell your story through the services and customer experiences you offer becomes really, really important. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about some things that are worth thinking about, and some of it in the context of the radio media as well, because that has a powerful role to play within a number of our different ways in which we think about marketing and reaching our customers, whether that's through content or whether that's through plain advertising. So you have an astonishing opportunity to tell your story, but you have to go and embrace authenticity. Authenticity is a really important part of what you do, and it's a bit of a sort of hackneyed sort of phrase, but I do remember at a conference being sort of slightly pigeonholed in one of the breaks by somebody from another part of the world who said to me, yes, and I'm working very hard on being authentic. You can't fake this stuff. Being authentic is really who your company is. That is what will colour another slightly overused sense of description, your purpose and your values, which obviously cascade into your brand. But essentially, it is what you're doing and the actions you're taking, and whether or not those are things that your purpose helps drive, whether new products, whether that's new channels, whether that's new ways of thinking about old problems. How do your values as a company help you? And one of the things I think you have is an astonishing choice of places to tell your story these days. Your choices that you make in terms of how you do that are as much as part of the mix as they possibly can be. So what you choose also sends a message, what kinds of ways in which you want to communicate. And the oral media landscape has had a fantastic renaissance in recent times. I think we'd all been sleeping under a rock if we didn't know about, obviously, all of the kind of rise of Audible, the whole world of podcasts, and all of that oral content that is really engaging people across the world. So you have a great opportunity now to tell your story in a richer context. It doesn't just have to be about how you find 30-second sound bites. It is about how you can flex that story across your business-to-business audiences, your business to kind of, corporate audiences. So start to think a little bit wider about how you tell your story. But in terms of framing your story, that's something I'd like to just spend a second or two on. One of the things that I think is very important is that who you ask to help you frame your story. Now, we all go through the standard stuff. There's ad agencies, there's all sorts of people, there's market research. There's also quite a lot often within the insides of companies. So take a little look around where the beating heart of your company lies. I was fortunate in my corporate career to have alongside me a business called First Direct at HSBC. If you wanted to know how First Direct worked, you went straight to the call centre. They were an astonishing group of people who could really let you know what customers were thinking, really let you know where the beating heart of the company lie. So start to look broader about where the places are that you can tell your brand story. And pick agency partners who get it and are happy to sit outside of the 30-second soundbite slice. Those are the kinds of agencies that I think will give you a good kind of service, but also ask you some tougher questions about your business. Pick media partners who are also up for different ways of thinking. And really, really importantly in all of this, find people who want to fuse their kind of programming people with their commercial people, because those are the kinds of companies that have a better chance of being able to tell your story for you. And be clear about what good looks like. One of the things I remember in my time at HSBC was looking at some programs where we were looking to try and get some engagement with a particular types of target audience. And all of a sudden, we had, I think, 3,000 people visit a website. Now, was that good or bad? Well, given that we found out that those 3,000 people were corporate treasurers and we were talking about the internationalization of the Chinese currency, they were very important. So the numbers game is an important one for you to be able to get across and start to really understand. Pure audience is not always the name of the game. It's not a volume game, it's a targeted game. And how you start to think a little bit like that becomes very, very important. And most important of all, when you start measuring, start thinking about how you'd also answer the why question. The why question is really important. I can remember having campaigns by some of our teams that looked at champion challenger things that said, this particular piece of digital copy did better than this piece of digital copy. And I used to sit there and say to them, why? Let's say it was a mortgage ad and it had some pictures of houses and some rates on them. And they say, why? And they all start guessing. We'll take the guesswork out. Try and figure out how to answer the why question. Because you know what? Because that had a nice house or the rate was bigger was a guess in those days. So take out the guesswork, have a structure to answer the why question. So really, there is a great opportunity now to actually take the pace of change that's happening all around us, the fact that so many things we've had for so many years we've taken for granted, are actually a time now for us to think a little bit differently. And I think this pace of change is something that we can use a word around that I think is a better word, which is dynamic. Dynamic is always something that's positive. So think about it as dynamic. Don't think about it as everything's changing and therefore you're lost and you don't know what to do. And always approach some of the more traditional problems. We need more sales leads, whatever. But approach them with a blank sheet of paper. Don't try and do last year plus 10%. And find partners from your agencies, from your business team, from your media owners, and always make sure what you're doing is what we used to call put the headlights on full beam. How far down the road can you see? How much into the future are you prepared to look? Stick them headlights on full beam and you'll be able to see well into the distance rather than stick them on dip and we can see what's basically in front of us. And all you say and all you do will now be, as it has been for a while now, part of the scrutiny under which any organisation, its marketing programmes, its products and services, any organisation today is under continuous scrutiny, particularly in financial services. There are regulations, there are all sorts of bodies prepared to sort of look at us with a degree of critical eye. And that will always be the case. So, one of the most important things is to make sure you deal with the truth. I always believe that the truth is a precursor to trust. And my one final tip actually comes from a man called John Paul Getty, who was asked once why he was successful and how he got so successful. And he said, get up early, work hard, strike oil. You don't get to do the third one unless you do the first two. So, back to the graft. Maybe some of that comes from home, but thank you for listening to my comments. Some of them might be useful, some of them might be things that you're already thinking about. But I wish you all a great deal of good luck, and I look forward to seeing some radio marketing that's a little bit different. Thank you.
Still to come, we'll be hearing from music artist and breakfast radio presenter Fleur East, and JUDITH Spilsbury will explore T's and C's in radio ads. Before that, our next session comes from Radiocentre's Planning Director Mark Barber, who's responsible for developing the industry body's award-winning research. Over the years, Radiocentre has amassed a bank of insight into the impact of radio advertising for brands. Today, Mark will take us through the research that demonstrates how radio can play a vital role in driving business for financial services companies when times are tough.
Good morning, everyone. With recession looming over the economy at least until the middle of next year, this presentation explores how radio can help finance brands invest their advertising budgets more effectively, accumulate market share, and bolster the bottom line. Assuming that's of interest, I'll move on. Now, I'm sure many of you have already seen some of the many press articles, blogs, or presentations doing the rounds that highlight the importance of continuing to advertise during a recession. Taking it a stage further, Marketing Week columnist Mark Whitson concludes that recessions are as much an opportunity as they are a threat, and believes that the best marketers will be upping, not cutting their budgets. Why is this? Well, recessions create unique conditions that allow smart marketers to disrupt category norms and drive brand growth faster than during normal times. One reason for this is that many brands reduce advertising spend when times are tough, opening the door for competitors to grow market share at their expense. This is because the key behind market share growth at any time is something called excess share of voice, achieved by spending proportionately more on advertising media than your share of market. The opposite is also true, by the way. If you spend proportionately less than your share of market, your market share declines. IPA analysis demonstrates that if a brand spends consistently ahead of their market position, then over time, their market share will grow to match their share of spend. And when your competitors are spending less, it's much easier for you to boost your excess share of voice. On top of this, recent analysis of the IPA databank by marketing consultant Peter Field reveals how excess share of voice effects are multiplied in a recession. As you can see from this chart, which compares market share growth at different excess share of voice or ESOV levels during the 08-09 recession compared to 2 years either side. The column on the right shows that brands that achieved excess share of voice of over 8% on average experienced market share growth 67% greater than they would have done during normal times. That's why recessions offer such great opportunity for growing market share. So how can radio help finance advertisers in this context? Well, firstly, for many categories, a budget spent on radio buys a much higher share of voice within the medium than it does on other media. For example, as this chart highlights, a finance advertiser spending £1 million on radio in Q4 last year would have achieved a 4.6% share of voice on radio, around 3 times what it would buy on online display, and almost 6 times the share it would afford on TV, the 2 most commonly used media in this category. And there's further data from the IPA which highlights the role that radio can play in boosting market share growth. This chart shows the efficiency of campaigns that feature radio in converting excess share of voice into annual market share growth, compared to campaigns that don't use the medium. As an illustration of what this means, a 10% excess share of voice on a campaign that includes radio converts into 0.8 percentage points of annual market share growth, compared to only 0.2 percentage points for campaigns that don't feature radio. Summarised more succinctly, this means if you're using radio as part of your media mix, then you'll be growing market share 4 times faster than if you're not. Now, beyond excess share of voice benefits, there's another reason why this particular recession offers even greater opportunities for advertisers to disrupt the category. People's brand purchase habits are deeply ingrained and difficult to shift. However, research from behavioural expert Richard Shotton shows that people who experience significant life events such as marriage, divorce, moving house or changing job are 2.5 times more likely to try a new brand compared to those who hadn't. Well, how is this relevant? Well, lockdown has radically disrupted everybody's lives as much, if not more than, these more typical life events. And as it is relaxed, this research suggests the scale of brand switching will be widespread. The main implication being that your customers are more likely to switch to your competitors, and your competitors' customers are more likely to switch to you. So it's vital to land on the right side of this equation. How can radio help ensure that you do? Well, firstly, and very simply, radio offers advertisers the best value for money audience delivery. For every £1 you spend on radio, you'll be buying at least twice as much audience as you will on any other medium. Or, for example, up to 15 times as much in the case of online video. Now, that's a big head start when you're looking to exert influence as widely as possible with your media plan. Beyond efficiency of audience delivery, radio is proven to boost advertising effects for finance brands when used as part of a wider media mix. Analysis of results from 99 finance campaigns measured on Radio Gauge highlights how radio significantly boosts overall campaign cut-through across a range of metrics, including ad awareness, brand relevance, and brand consideration. Now, which finance advertiser wouldn't like awareness of their campaign to be 36% higher? Radio is also a highly responsive medium, perfect when you need to deliver results quickly, especially online. For companies aiming to drive people to their website, this chart shows how interaction with insurance brands online is on average 70% higher among people exposed to radio ads compared to those that aren't, with the best performing campaign experiencing 116% uplift in brand browsing. These effects are immediate too. Over half of browsing is stimulated by radio, takes place within 24 hours of exposure to the advertising. And radio can have big effects on attitudes and consideration too, as this case study demonstrates. When Barclays decided to encourage entrepreneurs to take their business to the next level with a competition to win funding for their plans, they used radio to engage with audiences at a local level to promote the opportunity. Those exposed to the radio campaign were more likely to feel that Barclays supported and championed local business. But more importantly, they were twice as likely as those not exposed to consider Barclays for their future financial needs. But most crucially for advertisers marketing in a recession, as a result of all of these other effects, radio really delivers on the bottom line. As we can see in this chart, radio's ROI for finance advertisers is second only to TV, paying back £1.76 profit for every £1 spent. And this ROI efficiency of radio means that it can also have a powerful effect on overall campaign returns for finance advertisers. As this analysis conducted on Radiocentre's campaign ROI calculator demonstrates, total campaign ROI is 14% higher when radio is allocated 20% of a £10 million finance budget compared to when it's not used at all. Now, it may not sound like a lot, but based on this data, that's an extra £5.2 million in revenue added to the bottom line purely as a result of moving money from other media into radio. So, to summarise this brief tour of finance-related radio effectiveness research. Firstly, think about how incorporating radio into your campaign can help drive share of voice for your brand and convert that into market share growth 4 times faster than if you're not using the medium. Secondly, with increased likelihood of brand switching over the next few months, consider how radio can help ensure your brand gains more new users than it loses. And when budgets are tight, you need to make sure that every advertising impression has an impact and elicits a positive outcome for your brand. The evidence we've reviewed shows how when used as part of a wider media mix, radio helps finance campaigns cut through more effectively and has an immediate effect on influencing behaviour, be that in terms of increasing online response or driving consideration. And finally, and most vitally when times are tough, radio is proven to boost the bottom line for finance companies. Allocating money to radio from other media can significantly improve revenue returns from a campaign while remaining within the same budget. So taking all of these points into consideration, it's clear that incorporating radio into the mix can really make a difference in getting finance companies feeling bullish again. Now, if you're interested in finding out more or would like some advice on how radio can play a role for your business, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for listening.
Over the last few months, Radiocentre has been working to assist the advertising industry to provide support during these highly challenging times. From new research studies to creative best practice, here's a look at the resources Radiocentre has made available. Over the last few months, Radiocentre has been working to assist its members and the advertising industry to provide support during these highly challenging times. From negotiations with governing bodies, politicians and the public sector to resources for sales teams and media agencies. Radiocentre's Coronavirus Hub is home to multiple tools and resources, including our Radio Bites series, the latest news and best practice creative examples. Radiocentre also commissioned research agency DRG to explore how the coronavirus crisis has changed listening behaviour amongst commercial radio listeners. The study found that 38% of commercial radio listeners are listening to more radio than before lockdown, with audiences tuning in for an average of 26 hours a week, with 90% of listeners saying radio keeps them in touch with the outside world. Time to welcome 2018's President of the Cannes Lion Jury for Audio, Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie. Jo heads up Global's award-winning creative team, and today we'll discuss the speed and flexibility of radio, along with how to strike the right tone during these unusual times.
Good morning. Hello. My name is Jo McCrostie and I'm Creative Director at Global. Thank you for joining me today for Tune In. Radio has often been a medium favoured for its flexibility, for its agility, for the speed with which you can go from brief to broadcast. And throughout this period of disruption, I think it has surpassed all expectations in its ability to do that. We were very quick to respond to the crisis, setting up remote studios, and voiceover artists who are much more used to coming into our state-of-the-art Leicester Square studios repurposed bedrooms, basements, bunk beds, sheds, garages, understair cupboards, even airing cupboards apparently, and with the help of as many duvets and pillows as they could find to muffle the sound, they created their own home studios. We've made over 1,000 ads in lockdown, but a key concern for advertisers is how to get the tone right. In our research, we saw that lockdown created a surge in 3 core media need states. These were information and explanation, reassurance and connection, and distraction and escape. So let's take a look at how advertisers have tapped into these need states. And to kick off with, I'm going to share with you as good an example as you can get of this, which is the communication from the government. Here's a montage of some of the messages that we've all heard, sped up a little because there's a lot of them. Have a listen.
This is a message from the government about coronavirus.
If you or anyone in your household has a high temperature, do not leave home for at least 7 days.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Only leave your home for the following reasons. To exercise once a day. Don't go to the GP or hospital.
Continue to wash your hands regularly.
To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work. It's important we all help to protect older people.
This is a message from the government to all essential workers. You're doing vital jobs to keep our country going, and you can now get tested for coronavirus. You must remain at home as much as possible.
Mark Strong. Smooth, warm, easy on the ear, but I think the nation will forever remember him as the voice giving us the government's message. And it's authoritative, it's direct, but it's also really clear and calm. So the government's clearly leading in this space, but supermarkets were also really quick to inform shoppers and get their messages out. And this research here from Veritonic, first aired at Mediatel's Future of Audio conference, which was right back in April, shows just how well these ads performed. Really well. Really, really well above industry benchmarks. So people wanted information. They wanted explanation. And banks were all quick to connect and reassure their customers. But there was one issue. They were all saying the same thing, and so all the messages sounded the same. How could any one brand stand out and take ownership of its message? Have a listen to this montage.
With our app and online banking, you can manage your money like you did before, and we're updating our website daily with helpful guides and the latest information on our services.
One of the most convenient ways to do this is to use internet banking. It's both safe and secure. You can check your balance, view your transactions, and move money between bank accounts.
Plus, we've more than doubled the size of our support team. So, if you bank with us and COVID-19 has affected your business, visit our website for more information.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank, or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers. Because you are not an island. You are part of something far, far bigger.
Now, I deliberately cut the brand names out of those banks, but can you identify any brand in that montage? Normally this is where I'd ask for a show of hands, but because I can't see you, I put this to a panel of 2,377 people. And unprompted, there was one brand that really stood out. It was this one, HSBC. Respondents were able to correctly identify the HSBC ad over all the other competitors in that montage. And what's more, it exceeded category benchmarks for unprompted ad awareness. So even without the brand named in that montage, HSB stood out. And it's differentiated by its music, which was created by Jean-Michel Jarre and has been used since January of last year. So there's HSBC demonstrating a really effective use of brand music. But what about voice? Let's have another listen.
One day, social distancing will be a memory. Flattening curves will be done at the gym, and we'll all be experts in web chatting. Maybe. Until then, HSBC UK is here to help. From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers.
Okay, you don't need to listen to all of it, but we wondered if we might be able to improve on the brand's connection with listeners if we re-recorded the voice. So same script, same voice, but with a real focus on delivering a much more human connection. This is what it sounded like.
One day, social distancing will be a memory, flattening curves will be done at the gym, and we'll all be experts in web chatting. Maybe. Until then, HSBC UK is here to help. From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers.
There's a big difference between addressing an audience and actually connecting with customers. The re-record showed a 19% uplift in relevance, a 10% uplift in likability, and a 7% uplift in authenticity. So this really reinforces the importance of casting and direction, even if the recording's being voiced in a broom cupboard. And now, turning to our final need state, distraction and escape. In times of disruption, when things are unfamiliar, we find comfort in what is familiar. And there's a great opportunity here for brand to remind us why we love them. So this is just an idea, something that we mocked up for one of the nation's favourite brands. We wanted to see if a bit of escape and distraction or light-hearted playfulness might have an impact on brand consideration throughout these uncertain times. Here's the mock-up.
Me, yo, st, pa, st, the, wi, jib, term, so, s, a, ma, no, I, a, f, yo, a, da, day. Yummy pasta with a juicy tomato sauce and one of your 5 a day.
With an anagram in every mouthful, Heinz Alphabetti Spaghetti is homeschooling in a tin.
Again, we tested this on our panel, and amongst a target audience of children in household, the ad was seen as significantly more memorable, enjoyable, and relevant. But what's more, we saw a significant uplift in brand consideration for Heinz, which went up to 65%, and a 205% uplift in product consideration. And as the nation's mood and attitude shift, let's take a closer look now at finance. Over the lockdown period, finance brands have done a great job of communicating with existing customers and delivering on 2 key needs of information and reassurance. HSBC stood out in the montage that we shared earlier. And as we move out of lockdown and people start to consider new products or even switch brands, it's going to become even more important to create distinct communications that are consistent with your brand. So today I'm going to share with you a brand that does this really well. Really, really well. In fact, it's actually been named as the #1 audio brand in the world. Have a look at this film.
No visits, but staying close. No stadiums, but on the same team. No outings, but still active. No schools, but committed. No handshakes, but elbow to elbow. Apart, but united. MasterCard.
And here's another. The #1 audio brand. Just imagine how well that would do with greater exposure across radio. It would give MasterCard distinct ownership of its airtime, which would give them complete flexibility to adapt, to inform, to reassure, and to launch new products to meet the needs of their customers. As we emerge out of lockdown, our moods and attitudes will continue to change. And it's radio's ability to address the needs of the nation in a tone that reflects the mood of the nation that has been driving success for our advertisers. As Siobhan Kenny says, these need states also help explain the continued resilience of radio listening across a decade of intensifying competition. So radio is tried and tested by our top spending advertisers, and it's now producing some extraordinary and unmatched successes for new advertisers. So radio is proving now more than ever to be an infallible medium. I'm out of time now, so thank you very much for listening. And if you do have any questions, please get in touch. Thank you.
Still to come, Radiocentre's Camilla Kamara will explore the importance of a consistent brand sound. But first, we welcome Judith Spilsbury. As Head of Training and Special Projects at Radiocentre, one of Judith's roles is to work with advertisers and regulators to ensure that T's and C's on radio can be understood by the listener. Today, Judith will discuss how to make your T's and C's on radio more effective based on FCA-confirmed industry guidance.
Hello, I'm Judith Spilsbury, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the work that we've been doing on T's and C's to make them work for both advertisers and also for listeners. Underpinning all our work in this area are some key principles. Firstly, we recognise that consumers must be protected, and that to be protected they must be informed, but equally in a way in which they can absorb and understand the information that they're being given. Sometimes T's and C's can get very long, and we see that in three sectors in particular. Motors tend to have the longest T's and C's, but financial services are not far behind. So why is that important? Well, if you have a look at this is the engagement trace for a 40-second credit ad. An engagement trace is a measure of the extent to which the listener is actively engaging with the content of the ad. And what you can see in this case is the T's and C's begin about 20 seconds into the start of the ad. And within about 5 or 6 seconds of the T's and C's starting, the listener begins to zone out and simply stop paying attention. So is any information going in at all? Well, at Radiocentre, we've done a lot of research into how T's and C's work on radio. And the fact is that if T's and C's become too long and complicated, really important information gets lost. Typically, less than 4% of listeners will recall a really important piece of information like a total cost of credit when that is embedded in lots of other T's and C's. And so that kind of defeats the purpose of those T's and C's being there in the first place. So it's really important to try to make T's and C's on radio as clear as possible within, of course, the requirements of the regulation. A big focus of our work has been on motors, and that's mainly because they tend to carry the longest T's and C's. But actually, when those T's and C's tend to get longer, it's when they include a financial promotion, typically increasing the length of their T's and C's by up to 50%. So that's why I felt it was appropriate to talk to you about this work we've been doing on the motor sectors today. Obviously, there are T's and C's which are needed to comply with FCA rules, including mandated information like the representative example. However, analysis of FCA-required motor scripts revealed that nearly 2/3 of those regulated scripts included some terms which weren't always needed in order to comply with the regulation. So this is compounding that other issue of consumer understanding and consumer attention even further. So what we needed to do was to try and find a way of clarifying how to reduce the length of motor T's and C's as much as possible so that they could be easier for the listener to understand, but at the same time make sure that they were FCA compliant. And earlier this year, after many discussions with the FCA, we got sign-off from the FCA to publish our FCA-confirmed industry guidance for motors brands on radio. That's available on our website, and there's also a link to it on the FCA's own website too. What is FCA-confirmed industry guidance? Well, FCA-confirmed industry guidance illustrates ways that firms can comply with FCA rules. As you can imagine, to get FCA sign-off, our guidance had to go through several stages of scrutiny by different FCA teams. And I think that was absolutely right, because it was really important for both parties to make sure that we got this right. 3 key things I want to emphasise about our guidance. Firstly, it's about respecting FCA rules. It's not about replacing them. The other thing is, crucially, it's about maintaining the FCA's overriding principle of being clear, fair and not misleading, but trying to make that work better in the radio space. And as part of that, it's about cutting those T's and C's which just aren't needed under the regulations or aren't always needed under the regulations. So the guidance actually lists a number of terms which typically crop up in motors ads, but which aren't always needed. Now, a number of those terms are more common to motors promotions, but there are some parallels with other financial sectors. So what I'd like to do is just give an illustration of how this guidance can reduce T's and C's, taking the example of a car dealership ad.
The new Brand X Titanium could be yours for just £159 a month with an initial £1,200 rental payment at Brand X Dealership Roehampton. Personal contract hire agreement, £1,200 initial rental plus 47 months at £159. Subject to status, 18s or over. Total contracted mileage, 32,000 miles. Excess mileage charges and return conditions apply. You will not own the vehicle. Offer ends 31st August.
So seemingly quite a simple message, but quite a lot of T's and C's at the end. And based on the guidance, we can reduce these quite significantly. So I'm just going to run through these briefly with you. So for example, subject to status or 18s or over are terms the consumer would see as standard. And they would expect that to be part of any contract. So they're not necessarily needed here. And I suspect that's probably true of a lot of other kind of financial credit offers as well. There are a number of terms which probably relate more to a motor's financial lease offer, but which aren't always required, and the guidance explains why and when. And then there is a bit of repetition between the body copy and the T's and C's, which in this instance can be simplified. So, for example, initial rental and the monthly payment have already been mentioned, but what hasn't been mentioned is the fact this is a 4-year agreement, so you would have to put that into the T's and C's. So by doing this, and following the guidance, the T's and C's suddenly become a lot shorter and clearer, and I think they also sound a lot better too.
The new Brand X Titanium could be yours to lease for just £159 a month with an initial £1,200 rental payment at Brand X Dealership Roehampton. 4-year lease. Offer ends 31st August. Conditions apply.
So yes, this guidance is focused on motors, and I recognise that finance covers a whole range of different services and some very complex, but I do think from my experience of going through the process of developing the guidance, there were a number of common themes which emerged, and particularly 3 key questions for identifying what T's and C's need to be added. Firstly, is this information which the consumer would expect anyway, so you're not telling them anything they don't know already, so 18s or over, subject to status, all that sort of thing. Or is this really important information which they won't know, but which might be crucial to their decision as to whether or not to take this any further? Or does this information clarify something you said in the ad to make sure they're not being misled? So this might be about balance or just a further explanation of something that you've put into the ad. The only other observation I would make to that is if this is about clarifying something you've already put in the ad, it might be worth thinking about ways of making it simpler in the ad in the first place. So I'm going to stop there. I hope you found that useful. Do have a look at the guidance on our website, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you. Bye.
If you have a question for Judith, post it using the hashtag tuningin or tweeting at Radiocentre. Our next session comes from music artist and radio presenter Fleur East in discussion with Hits Radio's programme director Paul Gerard. Fleur will discuss how radio and brands can work together to deliver effective branded content.
Hello and welcome to Fleur East, who over the last few months has been presenting her brand new breakfast show, Hits Radio Breakfast, from her home in lockdown, but as well as that has been doing countless TV appearances on shows such as Lorraine, The One Show to name a few, releasing brand new music and even gate-crashing people's Zoom meetings whilst they're at home. Hi Fleur East.
Hi!
How are you getting on in lockdown then?
Lockdown has been a life changer for so many different reasons. I couldn't comprehend doing a breakfast radio show from home in lockdown, but with amazing technology and an incredible team, we've managed to broadcast every single morning. And it's been so much fun. I've actually enjoyed being able to do a breakfast show in my pajamas, to be honest.
And I think the beauty of it is, I mean, you're doing your show from 5 different locations in a morning, but it's been great for listeners to get an insight into what I guess is just real life, really, in a normal household.
Yeah, I think it's been very relatable, particularly during this pandemic and in lockdown, because we've been working from home as well as so many others around the UK. So having them listen to us broadcast, and we set the scene that we're in our pajamas and we're broadcasting from our living rooms or our bedrooms or wherever we are, has definitely given it that authentic feel, and we've been able to connect with our listeners on a completely different level.
I think what also makes radio really special is just how trusted it is. You know, you can be there in the darkest of times, and boy, don't we know these last few months have thrown some real curveballs at the way we've lived our lives. And I think hearing you guys go through that has, you know, comforted people in a really special way. I mean, how do you feel like you've had to adapt over these last few months?
I think we've become even more authentic during lockdown because, you know, you can't fight the situation that every single person is in. So it's a unique situation affecting the whole world. And we've been able to just be real about it, be true about our experiences, even from our first experience of going to the shop, or the first time we saw someone wearing a face mask, or getting on our first Zoom with our family. And I remember actually we got a phone call from a florist during lockdown. This particular lady was preparing bouquets and flower arrangements for funerals during lockdown. And she was so upset and deeply emotional about her situation. But she called us up and told us that she was listening to us every day. And she was actually preparing the flower arrangements. And she was close to tears, actually talking about her day-to-day activities and how it affected her. But she said that we were the light in her day, and we actually helped lift her spirits and helped her get through it. And to hear something like that, and to have such an emotional connection with someone like that closely and that intimately, was really special.
And I think we found more and more people turning to radio for that, really, as an escapism from what's going on. But I think something that you've done an incredible job with more recently is actually using your platform to help change things for the better as well, and tackling issues that, you know, perhaps other media would shy away from. I think radio is very good at talking to an audience in so many different ways, whether it be making them laugh, making them cry, but also to re-educate them. And I think the work you did around Black Lives Matters is so important in that. Do you want to tell us a bit about how that came about?
So we have our feature Rap Roulette every Friday, where I get challenged to write a rap on a topic selected at random, and I'm given 24 hours to write the rap. Now, we've covered a range of topics, from the most silly things to quite serious topics. So we went from doing a rap on the British Bake Off and getting Paul Hollywood to come on the show, to then rapping about something really serious and very important, like Black Lives Matter. The raps tend to be quite lighthearted to lift everyone's mood. But what I found really special was that we could use that feature to tackle really important issues, such as this. And it actually went on to have quite a major impact. It's probably one of the most engaging pieces of content we've put out as a breakfast show.
I think we often say that radio was the original social media because it just creates a conversation, whether that be a conversation when somebody's scrolling through their phone, whilst they're listening, or whilst they're in their car and they just start talking to somebody else. And I think that power to be able to tackle anything, whether it's something as simple as a bit of showbiz news to make people laugh, have some fun with a caller on the phone, or tackle an issue that actually can make a fundamental change to the way we live, is really powerful and shows what an engagement with audiences can deliver. And that leads on to some of the amazing work that you've done with commercial brands. And I think what's really powerful is how somebody can come to us and say, look, we want to do something really different, be part of something fun and engaging, as well as, you know, get our message out there. And it's fair to say that the audience really trust you, don't they?
Yeah, you almost build a friendship with listeners and a relationship, because ultimately they're waking up and listening to you every single day. So because we reveal so much about our lives and so much about our experiences, it's almost like they're listening to a friend every single day and they know so much about us. I remember when we did our Hits Live event and we had a commercial partnership with Openreach, and I'll never forget being tasked with going out into the arena and selecting somebody at random to win an iPhone. And at one particular event, I literally had to select someone at random out of thousands in the arena. And I managed to pick a girl whose birthday it was that day. So not only was she excited to be part of our Hits Live event and to be an avid follower of our breakfast show. But we put a massive smile on her face by giving her a prize on her actual birthday, while also promoting a brand and having a really successful partnership in that way. And so it's fun to be a part of exciting relationships like that.
I think everyone's a winner when something like that happens, and I think looking around, Bauer's portfolio at the moment, we've got some amazing brands working with our breakfast shows. Absolute's partnership with Wix, who've been sponsoring that breakfast show for years now, and it's that integration with the breakfast show, because I genuinely don't think there's anything stronger than being live and of the moment, is there? And that's something an algorithm on a streaming platform just cannot create. I mean, what do you love about live radio that would work so well for a client, perhaps?
I just love the element of jeopardy in a way. There's nothing that really compares to being on air live, and you're getting the action and it's in real time and it's a direct connection with whoever's listening.
I totally agree, Fleur, and I think that's what makes radio really powerful. It's that sense of community and the fact that it's always evolving.
I'll just take this off. Have a look. What do you think?
Got something for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yours.
We've teamed up with the Halifax Rewards Squad to reward those people who've gone out of their way to help others. Do you know someone like that?
We know you had to give this up to provide for the family, so this is for you, because we love you so much.
I feel quite overwhelmed, really, and emotional.
Over the years, Radiocentre's research has proven how a strong audio brand can boost the effectiveness of an ad campaign and increase the brand recognition. So we teamed up with audio producers Bounce to create Radiocentre's audio brand, including a sonic ident and brand song. The audio brand has already been used in radio ads, podcasts, online videos, and even right now at tuningin livestream. With the ever-growing possibilities presented by an innovative audio-focused future, Radiocentre plans to make the audio brand a key part of its identity for many years to come. Up next, we have Radiocentre's Insight Manager, Camilla Camara. Camilla is responsible for delivering the research and insight function and manages Radiocentre's bespoke research. Today, she will explore the importance of a consistent audio brand.
As you will have heard earlier, audio branding is something that's very important to us as an organisation. It's something that we implement into our own advertising. But why is it so important? And how can advertisers develop their advertising to make it even more effective? Now, when we're talking about brand assets, we're talking about the non-brand name elements that trigger the brand into the memory of category buyers. So, for example, a visual brand asset might be the use of a logo or the use of a particular font, whereas an audio brand asset is referring to things like musical cues or the use of sonic triggers. We know from analysis from Ipsos that 92% of ads use distinctive visual brand assets, whereas only 8% of ads use distinctive audio brand assets. So there's very much a disparity here. We also know from Ipsos study The Power of You that distinctive audio assets make advertising much more effective, indeed more effective even than visual assets. So this presents an opportunity for advertisers to develop their audio assets and make their advertising work even harder and become even more effective. But how can brands develop effective audio brand assets? According to research from Radiocentre, consistent ads are effective ads. When we look at the top 5 creative features of effective campaigns, consistent creative ideas, musical link with TV, consistent sonic, these are all the markers of the most effective campaigns. A big reason for this is that listeners are deprived of one sense, sight, so consistent audio assets help them to understand quickly who it is they're speaking to. A great example of this is McDonald's. We often associate McDonald's with their golden arches, but we also associate them with their audio brand cues. The "I'm loving it" catchphrase and the sonic trigger that accompanies it has been around for years, and they've maintained that while still being able to keep the creative fresh and flexible and adaptable to the campaign or to the audience.
I'm loving it.
But the value of consistency extends beyond TV. So if we look at campaigns that did not include TV, consistency is still key. Consistent creative route, a consistent voice actor, consistent music, the same logic applies. So let's take a look at some examples from the finance sector. You have Lloyds Bank with its consistent use of the song "You're Not Alone" across its TV and radio advertising. And MasterCard, which spent 2 years developing its sonic brand identity. Its CMO said, "Sound is our next frontier for brand expression and a powerful way for us to reach consumers through the passions that connect us all." And here's a listen. So in terms of audio branding, we know that audio brand assets are more effective than visual brand assets, but only 8% of advertising uses distinctive audio brand cues. So there's very much an opportunity here for advertisers to develop their creative further. But consistency is key. Being consistent with audio brand cues across ads and across media makes advertising much more effective.
Well, that just about concludes today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, of course, to Chris, Jo, Fleur and Paul, Judith, Mark and Camilla for your presentations. We all hope you found it useful. Next week, we'll be tuning in to retail. That will be the same time, same place, 9:30 a.m. next Tuesday, and you can register for this event via the Radiocentre website. You can also get in touch with any member of staff from Radiocentre through the website as well, and they'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you have any other further questions, my email address is below. Please do get in touch. If you are sent a feedback request, we'd really love to hear from you. Radiocentre has a lot of experience of live events, but these events are new and we want to make them as user-friendly and useful as possible. So anything you can let us know would be we'd be very, very grateful for. I hope you have a great week and hopefully see some of you next week. Thank you and goodbye.
That's all for Tuning In Finance. To find out more about Radiocentre's work or to get in touch with the team, head to radiocentre.org or follow Radiocentre on social media. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again at one of our real live events when it's safe to do so.